The crystal towers of the Galactic Judicial Council stretched high into the purple sky of Nexus Prime. Inside the main hall, thousands of alien beings worked at floating desks, processing legal documents from across the galaxy. But today, something unusual was happening. Magistrate Veltar, a tall being with silver skin and 3 glowing eyes, stared at the mountain of complaint forms piling up on his desk. Every single one had the same origin marked at the top: Sol System, 3rd planet, Earth. He had never seen so many legal cases from one small world before. Aid Morik, he called to his assistant, a purple creature with tentacles for arms. What is happening with this Earth planet? Why are there so many complaints? Morik floated over, his tentacles wrapped around several data tablets. Sir, the humans seem to have legal disputes with everyone. Mining companies, trade vessels, colony settlements, they argue about everything. Veltar picked up one of the forms. It was a complaint from a Centaurian trading company. The humans had apparently argued about the price of grain for 3 months, hiring lawyers and filing papers non-stop. Another complaint came from a mining operation on Europa. The humans had sued them over environmental damage, bringing in expert witnesses and demanding compensation. These humans are very active in their legal system, Veltar observed. He had dealt with thousands of species over his long career, but none had generated this much paperwork. The council needed to send a judge to Earth to handle all these cases. It should have been a simple assignment. Judge Krelon of the Peaceful Arbiters volunteered immediately. Krelon was known throughout the galaxy for his calm nature. He had settled disputes between warrior races, mediated trade wars, and brought peace to entire sectors. A small blue being with large, gentle eyes, he believed in quiet discussion and rational thought. How difficult could it be? Krelon asked. As he prepared for the journey, humans are a young species. Their legal system must be simple and primitive. 3 days later, Krelon's emergency transmission came crackling through the Council's communication system. The signal was weak and filled with static, but his panicked voice was clear. Abort mission. Requesting immediate extraction. Send help. The Council chamber fell silent. In 3,000 years of operation, no judge had ever called for emergency evacuation from a legal proceeding. Veltar activated the emergency response protocol. Judge Krelon, report your status. What is your situation? The transmission cleared slightly, and they could hear shouting in the background. Human voices, loud and aggressive, seemed to be arguing with great intensity. They're savages. Krelon's voice trembled with fear. I went to observe their legal proceedings to understand their system. But it's not a legal system, it's barely controlled warfare. Through the static, they could hear a human voice rising. In anger, Your Honor, I object to this line of questioning. My client's rights are being violated. To the aliens listening, it sounded like a battle cry. Krelon continued his report, speaking fast and breathing heavily. I watched one of their trials, Your Honor. A human named Kim Dong-soo was questioning a witness. He raised his voice, pointed his finger aggressively, and demanded answers with such force that I thought he might attack physically. The witness looked terrified. In the background, they could hear more shouting. That's completely irrelevant to this case. Objection. Order in the court. The spectators were just as bad. Krelon went on. They lean forward like predators watching prey. They whisper and point and react to every word with such intensity. And their judge has to bang a wooden hammer just to maintain control. Veltar exchanged worried looks with the other council members. Judge Krelon, surely you're exaggerating. No species conducts legal proceedings through combat. I'm sending you the recording, Krelon replied. See for yourself. The main screen in the council chamber lit up with footage from a Sol courthouse. The alien officials watched in horror as human lawyers gestured dramatically, raised their voices in passionate argument, and pointed accusingly at witnesses. When one lawyer stood up quickly to make an objection, several council members jumped back from the screen. Look at the aggression, gasped Councillor Vekmar. The way they move their hands like weapons, and their voices, whispered Judge Silthera, so loud, so forceful. They're clearly threatening each other. The recording showed Kim Dong-soo, a witness in what humans would consider a normal, professional manner. But to the aliens, his confident posture, direct questions, and occasional raised voice appeared to be acts of intimidation and barely restrained violence. You see, Krelon's voice came through the speaker. I tried to stay professional. But when that lawyer started pointing and raising his voice at the witness, I was certain violence would break out at any moment. The entire room was filled with tension and aggression. Within hours, word had spread. Throughout the galactic legal community, Earth cases were immediately classified as extreme hazard assignments. No judge wanted to face the legendary human legal warriors, who conducted their business through apparent intimidation and verbal combat. The small blue planet that had seemed so harmless was now marked in red on every judicial chart in the galaxy. After Judge Krelon's terrifying report spread through the galaxy, 2 more judges tried to handle Earth cases. Both returned with similar stories of fear and panic. Judge Mordain, the contemplative, known for his brave service in the most dangerous sectors, lasted only 2 hours in a human courtroom before calling for evacuation. Arbiter Silthic tried to observe a simple divorce case, but fled when the human lawyers began what he called aggressive negotiation tactics. The Galactic Judicial Council faced a serious problem. They had hundreds of cases involving humans that needed resolution, but no judge would take the assignments. The complaints kept piling up on their desks like a mountain of paper. Council Chief Farakin, a massive creature with golden skin and 4 arms, called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every major judicial system in the galaxy attended the holographic conference. "We cannot ignore these Earth cases," Varicon announced to the assembled judges. "The humans are part of the galactic community now. Their legal disputes affect trade, mining operations, and colonial settlements across 12 star systems." "But sir," interrupted Judge Yeltera from the Andromedian courts, "the reports are clear. These humans conduct legal warfare. No civilized being should be forced to endure such barbaric proceedings." Varicon S for arms moved in a gesture of understanding. "Varric-4, I am implementing Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. No judicial officer will preside over human legal proceedings without full military protection." The protocol was unprecedented in galactic history. It required armored bailiffs, energy barrier systems, emergency teleportation beacons, and armed security forces for every human legal proceeding. The costs were enormous, but the council decided it was necessary to maintain justice in the galaxy. Judge Hectron the Brave volunteered for the first protected assignment. Hectron was a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, where he had settled disputes between warrior races and criminal organizations. His red skin was covered in scars from dangerous missions, and his reputation for courage was known throughout the galaxy. "I have faced pirates, warlords, and space criminals," Hectron declared. "I will not be intimidated by human legal warriors." His preparation was extensive. 3 military transport ships carried the necessary equipment to Earth. Powered X for the Bailiffs, plasma shield generators, scanning equipment to detect weapons, and emergency evacuation pods were all loaded aboard. The finest security forces in the galaxy volunteered for the mission, considering it an honor to protect a judge from the legendary human lawyers. The convoy arrived at Seoul, South Korea, where the first case was scheduled to be heard. The local humans watched in amazement as alien soldiers began setting up a fortress around the district courthouse. Energy barriers hummed to life, creating a shimmering dome over the building. Armored sentries took positions at every entrance, their weapons charged and ready. Judge Park Min-ho, the Korean chief judge, stood in his office window watching the alien military operation below. He had been a judge for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this sight. Alien soldiers in powered armor were installing what appeared to be defensive turrets on his courthouse roof. "Sir," said his clerk, Lee Hyjin, entering the office with a confused expression. "The aliens are asking us to evacuate all non-essential personnel from the building. They say it's for our own safety." "Safety from what?" Judge Park asked. "It's just a simple contract dispute case." "I don't think they see it that way, sir." Outside, the alien security forces completed their preparations. The courthouse now looked like a military fortress. Scanning beams swept the area for potential threats. Communication arrays connected the site to orbital support ships. Everything was ready for what the aliens believed would be a dangerous encounter with human legal combatants. Judge Hectron arrived in a heavily armored transport vehicle. He wore full battle armor, his voice coming through electronic modules. As he walked toward the courthouse, 6 armed bailiffs flanked him on each side, their energy weapons visible and ready. The Korean court staff gathered to watch this strange procession. Court reporter Kim Soyoung whispered to Bailiff Choi Woobin, "Are we really that scary?" "I guess so," Choi replied, watching the alien judge disappear behind 3 layers of energy shields. "Look at all this equipment just for Attorney Lee's contract case." Inside the transformed courtroom, Judge Hectron took his position behind reinforced transpersonal barriers. His voice echoed through speakers as he addressed the empty room. "I have come to face the human legal warriors. Let the combat proceedings begin." Attorney Lee Junsu entered the courtroom and stopped in shock. Where once there had been simple wooden benches and a judge's desk, now there were energy fields, armed guards, and enough military equipment to defend a small city. The alien judge sat behind barriers like he was expecting an attack. "Your Honor," Lee said carefully, "I'm here for the Kim vs. Park Industries contract case. It's just a disagreement about payment terms." From behind his shields, Judge Hectron's modulated voice replied, "Prepare yourself, human warrior. I am ready for your aggressive tactics." Lee looked around at the armed bailiffs, the energy weapons, and the fortress-like security measures. He slowly reached into his briefcase for his legal documents, causing several guards to raise their weapons. "I just need my papers," he said, holding up a simple manila folder. The galaxy's bravest judge trembled slightly as he watched the human lawyer approached with what appeared to be his first weapon of legal warfare. The first official galactic court session on Earth was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in Seoul. The case seemed simple enough. A contract dispute between Kim Mining Corporation and a group of Centaurian mineral traders. The humans had ordered rare crystals, the aliens had delivered them late, and now both sides wanted compensation. It should have been a routine hearing that would take maybe 2 hours. Judge Hectron sat behind his fortress of energy shields, surrounded by 6 armed bailiffs in powered armor. The courtroom looked like a war zone. Scanning beams swept back and forth across the room, searching for hidden weapons. Emergency teleportation beacons blinked red on the walls, ready to evacuate the judge at the first sign of trouble. Attorney Yoon Ji-hoo arrived at the courthouse carrying his standard briefcase and a folder of documents. He was a quiet man in his 40s who specialized in business law. He had handled hundreds of contract cases and never once raised his voice in anger. Today, he planned to present his evidence calmly and professionally. Just like always, the security checkpoint took 20 minutes. Alien soldiers scanned Yoon's briefcase with 3 different devices, examined every paper in his folder, and made him walk through an energy field that checked for concealed weapons. They found his cell phone, his pen, his reading glasses, and his car keys. All were classified as potential combat equipment and placed in a secure container. Your pen will be returned after the proceedings, explained the security officer through his helmet speakers. Yoon nodded politely, though he wondered how he was supposed to take notes without a pen. Inside the courtroom, the Centaurian defendants sat in a special protected area behind their own energy barriers. They were small, gray beings with large eyes who looked nervous and kept whispering to each other in their native language. Their lawyer, a human named Park Soo-jin, sat beside them looking just as confused as everyone else. Judge Hectron's voice boomed through the courtroom speakers. The Galactic Court is now in session. Human legal warriors, prepare for combat. He stood up slowly, being careful not to make any sudden movements. He had been warned that the alien security forces were extremely jumpy. Your Honor, I'm ready to present my opening statement. Proceed, warrior, Judge Hectron replied, his voice trembling slightly. Yoon began speaking in his normal, conversational tone. Your Honor, the evidence will clearly show that the defendants failed to deliver the contracted crystals on time, causing significant financial damage to my client's mining operation on Europa. As he spoke, he lifted his hand to point toward a chart on the wall showing the delivery schedule. It was a simple gesture that any human lawyer would make dozens of times during a trial. Weapon detected, shouted the lead bailiff. Suddenly, the courtroom exploded into chaos. All 6 armored bailiffs surrounded Yoon, their energy weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. Red warning lights flashed throughout the room. The emergency evacuation alarm began blaring. I was just pointing at the chart, Yoon protested, raising both hands in the air. I don't have any weapons. Pointing device identified as hostile. The bailiff continued shouting. Behind his barriers, Judge Hectron activated his personal emergency beacon. Security breach. Human warrior has engaged in aggressive pointing behavior. Defense attorney Park Soo-jin jumped up from her seat. Your Honor, this is completely ridiculous. He was just second combatant engaging. Another bailiff yelled. Now both human lawyers were surrounded by alien soldiers. The Centaurian defendants cowered behind their barriers, their large eyes wide with terror. The court reporter, Jung Mira, sat frozen at her desk, afraid to move. We're just trying to do our jobs, Park Soo-jin called out, her voice rising with frustration. The aliens interpreted her raised voice as a battle cry. More security forces poured into the courtroom. Energy weapons powered up to maximum charge. The orbital support ships received an emergency signal and began preparing bombardment protocols. Prosecutor Nam Ki, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, finally lost his patience. He stood up and addressed the judge, with the same firm, authoritative tone he used every day in his regular job. Your Honor, I object to this entire charade. This is supposed to be a simple contract dispute, not a military operation. His commanding voice echoed through the courtroom. To the aliens, it sounded like a declaration of war. Alpha threat confirmed. The security chief shouted. Human pack leader has challenged the court. Judge Hectron's panic was complete. All units, prepare for evacuation. The humans have activated pack hunting behavior. The emergency teleportation system engaged, ready to beam the judge to safety. Orbital bombardment systems locked onto the courthouse. 3 star destroyers moved into position above Seoul, their crews preparing for what they believed was an imminent human uprising. Inside the courtroom, the Korean legal team stood with their hands raised, completely bewildered by the military response to their normal professional behavior. Attorney Yoon Ji-hoo looked at the energy weapons, pointed at him, and slowly asked, "Can I at least get my pen back?" The question was interpreted as a demand for his primary weapon. The security alert level increased to maximum, and half the galactic fleet began moving toward Earth. all because a quiet lawyer had pointed at a chart and spoken in a normal tone of voice. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. Within days, every alien species had heard the terrifying story of the Seoul courthouse incident. The tale grew bigger with each telling, like a snowball rolling down a hill. On the mining planet of Kepler-7, a group of rock creatures told the story to their friends. The humans surrounded the judge with their pack leaders. One of them said, his voice shaking, they used aggressive pointing weapons and battle cries that made the security forces call for orbital strikes. On a trading station near Rigel, a merchant captain spread the word to other traders. I heard they have lawyers who can make trained soldiers flee in terror just by raising their voices, she whispered. They call them legal warriors, and they fight with words sharper than plasma blades. The story reached the criminal underworld too. In the dark bars of the Outer Rim, space pirates and smugglers talked in hushed voices about Earth's legendary lawyer fighters. They say, one human attorney can defeat an entire courtroom full of judges and security forces, said a scarred draconian pirate. They use something called objections, like battle weapons. Within a month, something unexpected started happening. Alien beings across the galaxy began sending messages to Earth, asking to hire human lawyers. They had heard the stories and wanted these legendary legal warriors fighting on their side. The law firm of Park and Associates in Seoul received the first request. Senior partner Kim Tae-ho stared at his computer screen in confusion as he read the message from a Centaurian mining company. Dear Earth legal warriors, the message began. We have heard of your legendary combat skills in the courtroom. We are facing a difficult legal battle against the Vegan Trade Federation and require your fiercest lawyer. We offer triple payment for your services and guarantee safe transport to our world. Please send your most aggressive legal fighters immediately. Kim Tae-ho called his partner, Park Soo-jin, into his office. Soo-jin, look at this message. What do you think they mean by legal warriors and lawyer gladiators? Park Soo-jin read the message and scratched her head. I have no idea, but they're offering 3 times our normal fee. Maybe it's just a translation error. More messages arrived. Every day, a trade dispute on Proxima Centauri wanted the most feared human legal combatants. A mining operation in the Andromeda system requested pack leaders skilled in courtroom warfare. A colonial government offered huge sums for human lawyers trained in aggressive legal combat techniques. The Korean lawyers had no idea that their reputation as terrifying legal warriors was spreading across the stars. They thought aliens were just very impressed with their professional skills. Meanwhile, the alien judges were developing more and more extreme protection methods. Judge Quintara, the Ancient, refused to leave her dreadnought battleship when assigned to hear a case involving human colonists on Mars. Instead, she conducted the entire trial by hologram from lunar orbit, surrounded by 3 layers of military shields. I will not risk direct contact with the human legal warriors, she announced to her crew. Their reputation for courtroom violence is too well known. The case was a simple disagreement between 2 farmers about water rights. The human colonist, Lee Jun-ho, and his neighbor Park Min-soo sat in a small meeting room on Mars, filling out paperwork while the judge's hologram flickered nervously from space. Is she always this far away? Lee Jun-ho asked the court clerk. She says it's for safety reasons. The clerk replied, something about your species being dangerous in legal situations. The situation reached its peak of absurdity when Judge Mordok, the Terrible, was assigned to oversee a divorce case in Busan. Judge Mordok had conquered 3 star systems and defeated the legendary pirates of Zero, but he was terrified of facing human lawyers. He arrived in a walking fortress, a massive mechanical suit that stood 30 feet tall and was equipped with energy cannons, defensive shields, and enough firepower to level a city block. The courthouse had to be evacuated while he stomped through the streets, shaking buildings with each step. The divorce case involved a simple property dispute between husband and wife, Kong Mi-young and her ex-husband Kim Dong-woo. They sat in plastic chairs in the courthouse basement, the only room strong enough to support the judge's massive mechanical body. This seems like overkill for a divorce, Mi-young whispered to her lawyer, Song Oram. I think that's exactly the point, Song replied, watching automated defense turrets track their movements. They seemed to think we're some kind of legal super soldiers. Above them, Judge Mordok's voice boomed through speakers. Human legal warriors, I am prepared for your most aggressive tactics. Begin your courtroom combat. Songaram stood up carefully, trying not to trigger the weapon systems. Your Honor, we just need to divide the household furniture and decide who gets the cat. The galaxy's most feared military judge, encased in a walking fortress, trembled at the thought of facing what he believed were Earth's most dangerous legal gladiators in battle over domestic property rights. Word of this incident spread even faster than the previous stories, and soon every species in the galaxy was convinced that humans were the most terrifying lawyers in the universe. The case that would change everything involved the most serious charges the galaxy had ever brought against humans. a group of human colonists on Kepler-4 for to be accused of war crimes during a conflict with native alien species. The charges were severe, unnecessary violence, destruction of sacred sites, and violation of interstellar treaties. If found guilty, the entire human colony could face deportation or worse. The Galactic Council decided to send their most experienced judge, executor, Darthon the Merciless. Darthon had sentenced entire criminal organizations to prison. He had judged cases involving space pirates, war criminals, and the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. His reputation was legendary. No one had ever seen him show mercy or emotion. During a trial, if anyone can handle the human legal warriors, it is Darthon Council, Chief Farrakhan declared. He fears nothing and no one. But even Darthon was nervous about facing human lawyers. He arrived at Earth with 3 star destroyers, a full battalion of elite guards, and enough military equipment to invade a small planet. The courthouse in Sol was converted into an impenetrable fortress. Energy barriers surrounded the building. Automated defense systems scanned for threats. Emergency evacuation systems stood ready. Darthon himself wore the most advanced battle armor in the galaxy. His voice came through multiple layers of electronic filters. He sat behind barriers that could stop plasma cannons. Around him, 50 armed guards maintained constant watch. I have faced the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy, Darthon announced to his security forces. But the reports say human lawyers are more terrifying than any space pirate or war criminal. Stay alert. The human legal team was led by Professor Lim Sung-ho, a 70-year-old law teacher from Seoul National University. Professor Lim had never practiced criminal law before, but the colonists had specifically requested him after hearing about his reputation for fairness and wisdom. He was known throughout Korea for his gentle manner and thoughtful approach to legal problems. Professor Lim arrived at the fortress courthouse carrying only a worn leather briefcase and his reading glasses. He wore a simple gray suit and walked slowly, like any elderly professor heading to class. The massive security apparatus around him seemed ridiculous, like using a nuclear weapon to kill a fly. The alien guards were confused as they watched this frail old man approach. Their intelligence reports had described human lawyers as savage warriors. But Professor Lim looked more like someone's grandfather. He smiled politely at the guards and thanked them for their service. "Are you sure this is one of the legendary human legal warriors?" asked the security captain through his helmet radio. "The identification is confirmed," came the reply. "Remain on high alert." Inside the courtroom, Executor Darthon studied the elderly professor through his armor's scanning systems. Every reading showed that this was just a normal old human. No hidden weapons, no enhanced strength, no signs of aggression. But Darth had read the reports about human legal combat. He knew this peaceful appearance must be a trick. The trial began with Professor Lim speaking in his usual quiet, respectful manner. "Your Honor, thank you for your time and attention to this important matter. The colonists I represent made serious mistakes, and we do not deny that. But I hope to show you that these mistakes came from fear and misunderstanding, not from evil intentions." Darthon waited for the aggressive tactics to begin. Where was the loud voice? Where were the threatening gestures? Where was the famous human legal warfare? As the trial continued, Professor Lim questioned witnesses with gentle patience. When a witness became upset, he offered them water and time to rest. When presenting evidence, he spoke clearly and simply, never raising his voice or making dramatic gestures. His questions were polite but thorough, seeking truth rather than victory. The evidence shows that the colonists were frightened when the native species approached their settlement. Professor Lim explained calmly, they had no translator, no way to communicate. In their fear, they made terrible decisions. But fear is not the same as hatred. Your Honor, during his closing argument, Professor Lim talked about the importance of understanding between different species. He spoke about forgiveness, about learning from mistakes, about building bridges instead of walls. His voice was soft but clear, filled with genuine emotion and compassion. These colonists are not war criminals, Your Honor. They are frightened people who made bad choices in a scary situation. Justice requires accountability, yes, but it also requires mercy. We are all learning to live together in this big galaxy. We will all make mistakes as we learn. As the elderly professor spoke about hope and understanding, something extraordinary happened. Behind his armor and barriers, Executor Darthon, the Merciless, began to cry. Tears rolled down his face as he listened to this gentle human talk about compassion and forgiveness. For the first time in his long career, the galaxy's most feared judge was moved to emotion by the simple humanity of a soft-spoken teacher. "I understand now," Darthon said, his voice breaking through the electronic filters. "You do not fight with words, you heal with them." News of Darthon's emotional response spread across the galaxy faster than any story before it. The great revelation changed everything. Human lawyers were not savage warriors, but passionate advocates for justice and understanding. Within weeks, the Galactic Council revised all their protocols, and Earth became the galaxy's premier destination for learning advanced legal advocacy through compassion.